in Major League Baseball, there are things called contract incentives. Contract incentives are benchmarks for players to achieve to earn additional income. For example, a contract incentive might be something like if a player plays in at least 100 games in a season, he'll earn an additional $100,000. Another one could be if a player wins the MVP award, he'll earn an additional $500,000. An example of a real-life current one involves starting pitcher Kyle Gibson. Gibson's contract states that for every season he reaches 180 innings pitched, he'll earn an additional $500,000. Contract incentives are abundant not just in baseball, but all professional sports. In fact, it would be unusual not to see contract bonuses among athletes. They're common and have been present in professional sports for a very long time. Typically, contract incentives only last the length of the contract. A player can only receive a bonus while under said contract. Makes total sense. Even if a player achieves the incentive after the contract ends, he wouldn't earn the bonus as the incentive is only tied to the current contract. These incentives also seem very straightforward. Either Kyle Gibson pitches at least 180 innings or he doesn't. Once the season ends, that's it. He can't add any more innings and he can't add any more once the contract ends. But what if it was possible to earn an incentive after the season ended? One might say it's impossible to change someone's stats once the season ends. Well, that is true, except for one major exception. A player once earned a contract incentive 50 years after achieving it. This wasn't as if the team forgot to pay him, but this former player did not physically earn the incentive until 50 years after the season ended. It's one of the most bizarre events in baseball history, and this is the story of how a player earned his bonus nearly 50 years after achieving it. The player in question is former Orioles first baseman Jim Gentile. Gentile played in the major leagues from 1957 to 1966 for multiple teams, but most notably with the Baltimore Orioles. He was a terrific slugger while in Baltimore. Gentile batted .261 with a .370 on base and a .489 slugging for an OPS of .859 and an adjusted OPS of 137. There were 46 MLB players to have as many or more plate appearances as Gentile during that time frame, and Gentile ranks 9th out of 46 in adjusted OPS. A definite underrated hitter during his time in the big leagues. The best season of his career came in 1961. That season, he batted .302 with a .423 on base and a .646 slugging for an OPS of 1.069 and a 187 adjusted OPS. He hit 46 home runs and drove in 141 RBIs. Among all MLB players, Gentile ranked 3rd in OPS, 3rd in adjusted OPS, and 11th in WAR. He placed 3rd in MVP voting and probably would have gotten more recognition if not for the fact that was the season Roger Maris broke Babe Ruth's single-season home run record. I mentioned Gentile's 1961 season because he had a contract incentive in place with then general manager Lee MacPhail. MacPhail told Gentile that had he led MLB in RBIs, he would have received a $5,000 bonus. Gentile drove in 141 runners, one short of the lead, as Yankees outfielder and that season's MVP Roger Maris drove in 142. Oh well, Gentile got close, but Maris was just barely better. Better luck next season, right? As it turns out, Gentile did lead the league in RBIs. In 1995, 34 years after that 1961 season, an error was discovered. Ron Rakowski, who worked for SABR, the Society for American Baseball Research, discovered that Maris was credited for an RBI when he should not have. On July 5, 1961, in a game against the Cleveland Indians, Maris came to bat in the bottom of the third inning with shortstop Tony Kubek on first base. Maris hit a line drive to right field in this at-bat. Cleveland right fielder Willie Kirkland threw the ball to third baseman Bubba Phillips. Phillips saw Maris take a wide turn at first, so he quickly threw the ball to first base to try to get Maris out. Phillips' throw went wild and landed in the stands. That error allowed Kubek to come in and score, and since Kubek scored on the error and not the hit, that is not an RBI for Maris. Despite the fact that is not an RBI, Maris was still credited for one on this play by the Yankees official scorer. Since Maris did not earn an RBI on this play, he theoretically ended the season in a tie with Gentile for most RBIs by a player that season. When this statistical error was discovered, Gentile was contacted about it, where he basically laughed it off and admitted he would have made an extra $5,000, but it was all in the past now. He even joked and said he ought to write a letter to the Orioles. Rakowski reached out to the commissioner's office at the time, where multiple spokesmen basically said, "We'll look into it." This debacle was swept under the rug and all but forgotten about, until 15 years later when MLB officially recognized this statistical error and changed their record books in 2010. Maris was stripped of that RBI, and Jim Gentile, nearly 50 years later, rightfully earned a tie with Maris for most RBIs in the league in 1961. After this error was fixed, and Gentile was officially credited as a tie for the lead in RBIs, ESPN writer Rob Nair penned an article about this event that took place and had the interesting thought if the Orioles owed Gentile that $5,000. Legally, the team probably didn't have to pay him anything, but Gentile was promised $5,000 had he led the league in RBIs, and he did lead the league in that category. It just wasn't recognized until 50 years later. Well, Gentile actually would receive that bonus. About a week after that ESPN article was released, the Orioles invited Gentile to a game where, during a pregame ceremony, they presented him with a check for $5,000. The check was presented by Andy MacPhail, who was the Orioles president of baseball operations at the time, and just so happened to be the son of Lee MacPhail, the same general manager that made that promise to Gentile 50 years prior. Everything came full circle for Gentile and the MacPhails. Gentile earned his bonus, which was promised and presented by the same family nearly 50 years apart.